identified always as a Christian, I think, but I didn't really know what that was. And I, finally to the point where after everything was going great for me in the world, I still have that same hole to fill. And I went back and I read the Bible again. Like my story and the story of me as a Christian, I brought that into the role of Reagan. And, I was born in Houston. I was Southern Baptist. Growing up, we went to the First Baptist Church downtown Houston and then switched over to Bel Air, Texas. But, it's that in the 50s and 60s, it was such a great time to be a kid in this country. And I was baptized when I was 9. And in my teen years, I became disillusioned with what I call churchianity, I guess. And it was also late 60s, early 70s. There was a lot of other things that were, pulling at this country. And I got into, I read a book called Siddhartha. I got into reading about other religions, Hinduism. I went around the world. I read the Bhagavad Gita, the Dhammapada. I'd read the Bible, cover to cover, and read the Quran. And there was a drug culture at the time. Back in the 60s and 70s, it was the drug culture that was going on there. It was about to expand your mind.
Did you inhale?
It was like a spiritual experience.
Did you inhale?
Did I hit it? Yes, I did inhale.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah, I did. I'll say it right now. But I wound up, things are, it's all about really filling that hole, that empty hole inside you. And I identified always as a Christian, I think, but I didn't really know what that was. And I, finally to the point where after everything was going great for me in the world, but finally getting to that point, after I did Great Balls of Fire, where I played Jerry Lee Lewis. Yeah. God bless his soul, rest his soul. Yeah, I was in rehab about 6 months after. Well, I'd been his 5th go around, but I wound up in rehab about 6 months after I finished the movie. And when you got out, you still have that same hole. You might get sober, but you still have that same hole to fill. And I went back and I read the Bible again.
My goodness.
And
what year
this time
would
around,
this have been?
That would have been 1990, 1992, right around there. And it this time it was the red words of Jesus in the New Testament that really hit me, and that was the beginning of my personal relationship with Jesus Christ.
Wow.
I'd never really gotten that before, and that continues to grow, but that is really what everybody's looking for, whether they know it or not.
What age would this kind of maybe first-time realization of what a personal relationship with Jesus is? What age were you?
I was in my 40s.
Yeah, in your 40s.
Yeah.
So you kind of did a full circle thing. Started in church, went around the world looking, searching, and came back to that truth in the 90s.
Yeah. And, that had a personal relationship. But that's not the end of the story. I'm a human being, and I've gone through cycles and, of ups and downs, peaks and valleys in my spiritual life, that sometimes, that God is silent, and then I wonder, but I've always, I talk to God,
It's called prayer.
Yeah, and a lot of it's called listening.
There you go.
So, through that, my relationship with him deepens, and it's, I am where I am today.
We do these kind of conversations a lot, Dennis. There's this interesting kind of thought that you can apply to some of these seasons in your life, as it were, is how do you even know you have faith unless it's called upon? If you never go through a desert season or this kind of midbar, a silent season, and what's really interesting about these kind of silent or what we would call a desert experience or something like that, is the Hebrew word for desert is midbar. And if you would ask somebody that understands the Hebrew language, they would say midbar is actually a positive thing. We think of silent seasons in our life as these kind of God's distance from us and he's left us alone and all that. And the Jewish connotation of midbar is very good because the desert, the wilderness is where you experience God. And it's a positive thing in the Jewish kind of language. And we sometimes get that all wrong, that if it's quiet or it's a lonely season, or if it's kind of a desert series and we're distant, we're further from God. And maybe it's the opposite of that. Maybe that's when we're actually closer to God, that he's nearer to us.
Faith and trust is strong.
Even at our lowest point, you're saying?
Yeah.
Jesus on the cross that's crying out to God because God was silent even in death. And it's a stress test, I guess, in a way too, isn't it? You were talking about faith. You don't know. How do you know you have faith until it's
called upon?
That stress point. And, we have our knee-jerk reactions. Then that gets back to the principles that we were talking about, too, with Ronald Reagan as well. About you have something solid there that you can go to in those times of trouble. I wrote a song about those seasons in life.
Really?
That it's called God Gets Lonely Too.
My goodness.
That how he wants to have a relationship with us as much
as we need a relationship.
As we need a relationship with him.
Yeah. Right.
You're very familiar to our viewing audience. You're very familiar to Laurie and myself, because we've seen you on the big screen, the small screen. Behind you, there's a poster of you that I actually thought for a moment that was actually Ronald Reagan, and that you were turning into Ronald Reagan. I realized, no, okay, that's actually you back there. But how did this experience of playing him come about? You're taking one of these people out of history that you realize the largest news event in our lifetime was basically the end of the Cold War. I mean, that's literally one of the biggest events in our lifetime. And this guy was, as it were, hell-bent on getting that done.
He, the Pope, and Lech Walesa basically accomplished that.
Maggie Thatcher was kind of thrown.
Yeah, she was in there too.
Yeah.
And Reagan had been fighting communism all his life, really, from the time that he was president of the Screen Actors Guild, by the way, and he was fighting communists there because they were trying to take over the unions. People thought it was an old wives' tale that, but then when the Soviet Union fell, they found the files, and they were trying to take over the unions. And boy, did we need him. It took a Cold Warrior like him to really know what the real world was like and lead us there. And it would be a much different world if it weren't for Ronald Reagan.
I'm interested in knowing how you approach this craft that you're doing, and taking on Ronald Reagan is a pretty tall order.
Yeah.
I understand your mama kind of had some effect on you.
A little bit, yeah. She's got to do this, because I didn't think I looked like him, or I definitely didn't sound like him, and he's one of the most recognizable, like Muhammad Ali, recognizable in the world. And so, that really a fear went up my spine about it. And that's usually a sign that I should say yes, because it gets me out of my comfort zone about it. It's but it's about the way I work is it's about from the outside in a little bit, but also finding out the humanity getting down to what makes somebody tick, and something that I can relate to a person with. We both have sunny dispositions. I know that we're both actors, and it's about. There was a part of Reagan that was very, very private, almost impenetrable. That I found everyone who had known him had said, and really, I wanted to get down to what that was, and I think that was his relationship with God. Actually,
Wow.
I really do. There was a very private place in there that was hard for anybody else to enter.
Yeah.
A very private man.
Feels like
And
whenever.
this is a great communicator.
Yeah, it feels like whenever he would speak and embrace faith and faith issues. Again, this 1983 was, quote, the year of the Bible, and so many of the Christian leaders, my dad and others, and Bill Bright and all the ones that were kind of there at that time, were so they were literally enamored by the way that he could command the attention of the world, and figuring out how to do that on screen had to be the fear moment coming up your back to walk in and actually portray that.
I mean, he had to get there himself. You know, one of the things I kind of felt when I play a real person, I feel like I have an obligation to play them from their point of view. And that means finding out, about their strengths, or, that can be obvious to all of us that we admire and stuff. And sometimes to find out, get to maybe some of those insecurities that we all feel too, because we're all human beings and we all feel the same things going through life. And one of the things was with Reagan, I don't think as an actor he ever got to that place that he aspired to be.
Oh, wow.
As an actor. And whether it was that, he was relegated to B movies by Jack Warner, and, John Wayne already had his spot, or whatever it was. And he was, he was married to Jane Wyman I think at this time. And she was winning an Academy Award while his career was going down. And what do you feel like inside with that?
Yeah.
It's those little things that actually kind of shape us in a way. And, I think God's purpose for him was becoming president. It was because really with kind of his career going downhill that he became vice president and then president of the Screen Actors Guild, which was really his entry into politics.
My goodness.
And fighting communism, back in the 50s and 60s, as in the guild there.
That's actually an amazing point that you bring up, that so often we fight the thing that we're trying to prop up or that we're trying to do. What if he would have kept fighting and pushing and elbowing back into roles? You see, God was making a left-hand turn for him.
That's what we do. Is it? I get this expression that keeps coming back to me that, you got to be careful what you ask God for, because he just might give it to you.
Yeah.
And he'll give it to you in a way that you didn't expect. And you go, wait a minute. That's not what I meant. We're tested in that way. And it's about finding purpose in life. What is God's purpose for us? And that's, I think he got led in a roundabout way to that. And acting helped out in the end because, as president, he was the greatest actor we ever had.
So how do you think the assassination attempt on his life changed him?
Very interesting. We just had one.
Yeah.
A couple, another one, first one since Reagan, in fact. I think he said that, my life is no longer my own after surviving that.
Yeah.
It's going to be a very humbling event to happen to you.
Life-changing.
Your mortality, passes in front of your eyes. And, we're mortal. God reminds
What we're here for.
Yeah. And Reagan as well, he was waving, a bullet bounced off. It went in right here. They were going to go back to the White House because they thought he was okay. And, blood came out of his mouth about halfway there, and they went to, I think it was Walter Reed, and the bullet was about that far from his heart. So again, it was about a quarter of an inch from being gone.
What do you want us to experience
Listen,
coming out of the theater?
I think for people who were born before 1990, remember what this country could be.
Wow. Wow.
When we're all together, when we're united. And also remember, even though we were like not divided sometimes, how well we all worked together in a sense. And what this country was and what it still can be.
Yeah.
And those after 1990, you get a little education of what it could be.
Yeah.
Still.
A lot of the viewers older than us are saying amen, and the younger ones are going, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
Because they haven't seen politics done at a level where we can really embrace
you
somebody
can't blame
as
them.
president.
Back then we had liberal Republicans and conservative Democrats. And there really wasn't all that much difference between the two.
Yeah.
And that has become so polarized. And, in a way, I think COVID has been kind of the beginning of a spiritual awakening again in this country.
Beautiful.
It's usually spiritual awakenings, usually they're a struggle.
Yeah.
And that's what we've done, and we've done it together. And we have to learn how to get back to that.
That little flicker of hope again.
Yeah, we're all Americans.
Right.
Yeah, it felt like we had a touch of it at 9/11, that all of a sudden we were Americans again. It feels like COVID kind of brought the world together. The largest streaming event in YouTube's history was Andrea Bocelli walking out in front of the Duomo in Milan singing Amazing Grace. He walked out and sang that song, and it felt like we could attain to something bigger. And it feels like Reagan represented that last era of that time.
Right. Well, every generation has their own test of that too, don't they? And I think COVID was the way for one thing, everybody's life stopped.
Yeah.
And realized
Crazy.
how fragile, all this jobs and this and that are. And it brought us back into homes, doing a routine that we hadn't maybe done in 20 years. The kids are home, families are together, and it really brought some introspection to people about looking into, their own spirit. And what do you fill that with? And, I think you have to talk to God at some point.
Yeah. Something we haven't talked about is Tim and Nancy. Their little love affair through all the years was so inspiring.
That's really central to this film.
Yeah.
In fact, in a way, you could say this is the love story, this film. There wouldn't have been a President Reagan without Nancy. And I'm not saying that she was the puppet master or anything like that. It was just the strength of their relationship. They had God in their relationship as well. And how behind him she was. And they found strength in each other. And he wrote her love letters every day, a little love note. Even after in the hospital after the assassination attempt. And Penelope Ann Miller, she plays Nancy, and I don't know, she channeled her. I don't know how she was doing this, but it was like sometimes even annoyingly so, a little bit. I mean, it's so great. It was fantastic. I mean, I would look at her. I would have had been able to do Reagan without somebody really fantastic in that part. She was so good.
Let's circle back to the influence of your mama on you and this movie.
Yeah. Well, my mom was always has been. She was the rock in my life, She was there. She was always there to remind me about a lot of things, and a lot of things I didn't want to hear as well. But
what are moms for?
she was just a really great lady, who, loved God and wanted us to have a relationship with Jesus in a very personal way. That personal way really kind of came to her really back in the 80s as well, which I guess is late in life. But she was, she was somebody with principles too. And I really miss her. I do know that.
She was happy when you finally signed on to this film.
Yeah, she was around for that. I wish she was here for when it comes out next month, but she'll be here in spirit.